They say justice is blind, but sometimes it needs a little help seeing the truth. When my ex-husband stood in that courtroom and called me an unfit mother with such conviction, I felt my world crumbling. 5 years of carefully rebuilding my life after leaving him seemed to dissolve under those fluorescent lights. But then my 15-year-old daughter Emma did something that changed everything. She revealed she'd been recording his true intentions all along. The moment she pulled out her phone, his perfectly crafted mask cracked for everyone to see. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never thought I'd be sitting in a family court at 42 years old, fighting for the right to continue raising the child I'd dedicated my life to. But that's where I found myself last spring, with sweaty palms and a racing heart, watching the father of my child systematically try to dismantle my credibility as a mother. My name is Rebecca Walsh. 5 years ago, I was Rebecca Mitchell, married to James Mitchell for 16 years, living in a 4-bedroom colonial in Westbrook, Connecticut that looked perfect from the outside. The kind of house with hydrangeas, lining the walkway and family photos arranged just so on the piano. The kind of family that neighbors might envy, with backyard barbecues and matching Christmas sweaters for our holiday cards. No one looking at those smiling photos would have guessed that I'd been slowly disappearing for years. The day I walked into that courtroom, I hardly recognized myself. My attorney, Diane, had suggested I wear something approachable but professional. I'd chosen a navy blue dress with a modest cardigan, something that wouldn't stand out or draw criticism. My hair was pulled back in a simple style, my makeup minimal. I'd spent 16 years learning the art of being presentable without attracting too much attention. Some habits are hard to break. Emma sat behind me, her expression a mixture of anxiety and fierce determination. At 15, she looked more like me than her father, with the same wavy brown hair and hazel eyes, though she had James's height, already towering over my 5'4" frame. She wore the outfit we'd carefully selected together, a conservative blouse and skirt that made her look both youthful and mature. Next to her sat my sister Catherine, who had driven 3 hours to be here, despite having 3 children of her own at home with the flu. Across the aisle, James sat with perfect posture in his tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair showing distinguished touches of silver at the temples. Even after everything, I couldn't deny he was handsome. That was never our problem. Next to him, his girlfriend Vanessa pretended to study her manicure, though I caught her glancing in my direction with barely concealed triumph. She was everything. I wasn't. Tall, blonde, confident, with a successful career in pharmaceutical sales and no children to complicate her schedule. She'd been with James for 2 years, though I suspected their relationship had begun before our separation. James's attorney, Martin Gregory, was known throughout Connecticut for his aggressive approach to high-conflict custody cases. His services cost $500 an hour, money that should have been going toward Emma's college fund, now being used to try to take her away from me. The courtroom itself felt oppressive, with its dark wood paneling and fluorescent lighting that somehow managed to be too bright and too dim simultaneously. The judge's bench loomed large, currently empty as we waited for proceedings to begin. The court reporter sat ready, her fingers poised over her stenotype machine. A bailiff stood near the door, expressionless. I tried to remember what Diane had coached me on. Sit up straight, make eye contact, speak clearly, don't show anger. Don't let them see you cry. Don't react to provocations. Remember that everything is being observed and evaluated. I felt like an actress who hadn't been given enough time to learn her lines, about to perform in the most important role of her life. Emma reached forward and squeezed my shoulder. When I turned, she whispered, "We've got this, Mom." That simple gesture of support from my daughter, who shouldn't have had to be strong for her mother, nearly broke me. But there wasn't time for tears. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Harriet Powell entered, her expression neutral as she took her seat and reviewed the files before her. "We're here today regarding the petition for modification of custody in the case of Mitchell versus Walsh," she began, looking over her reading glasses at all of us. "Mr. Mitchell is seeking primary physical custody of the minor child, Emma Mitchell, age 15, with limited visitation for Ms. Walsh. Based on the filings, this appears to be a significant change from the current arrangement where Ms. Walsh has primary custody. Is that correct, Mr. Gregory?" Martin Gregory stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "That's correct, Your Honor. Since the divorce 5 years ago, new information and circumstances have come to light that make my client gravely concerned about his daughter's well-being in her mother's care." I felt my stomach twist at the word gravely. It sounded so serious, so damning, as if I had been neglecting or harming Emma, when in reality, we had built a stable, loving home together despite James's attempts to undermine us at every turn. "And Ms. Kaplan," the judge continued, looking at my attorney, "your client opposes this modification?" Diane stood, her posture confident, despite being several inches shorter and many years older than Gregory. "Absolutely, Your Honor. Ms. Walsh has been the primary caregiver for Emma since birth. She has provided a stable, nurturing environment, and there have been no material changes in circumstances that would warrant modifying the current custody arrangement, which is working well for the child." Judge Powell nodded. "Very well. Mr. Gregory, as the petitioner, you may present your case." Gregory approached the podium with the smooth confidence of someone who had done this hundreds of times. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that Rebecca Walsh is emotionally unstable and increasingly erratic in her parenting, creating an environment that is detrimental to Emma's development and well-being." I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Emotionally unstable, erratic. These words were calculated to paint me as dangerous, unpredictable, the exact opposite of who I was and had always been. "Furthermore," Gregory continued, "Ms. Walsh has engaged in a pattern of parental alienation, systematically undermining Mr. Mitchell's relationship with his daughter and interfering with his court-ordered visitation. We have documented numerous instances where Ms. Walsh has either directly prevented visitation or created circumstances that made meaningful father-daughter interaction impossible." This was a complete inversion of reality. For 5 years, I had bent over backwards to accommodate James's constantly shifting schedule, rearranging my own life and Emma's activities to ensure he never missed his weekends, even when he would cancel at the last minute or return Emma hours earlier than agreed upon. We will present evidence that Ms. Walsh has prioritized her social life over her daughter's needs, leaving Emma unsupervised for inappropriate periods of time. Additionally, there are concerning reports of Ms. Walsh's romantic relationships, creating an unstable environment in the home. My cheeks burned. My social life consisted of a book club that met once a month and occasional dinners with Catherine or my 2 close friends. As for romantic relationships, there had been exactly one, a teacher from Emma's former school whom I had dated for 6 months, 2 years after the divorce. We had ended things amicably when it became clear we wanted different futures, and he had never once stayed overnight when Emma was home. "Your Honor," Gregory's voice took on a grave tone. "Most concerning of all are Emma's declining academic performance and increasing behavioral issues at school, which coincide directly with periods of heightened instability in Ms. Walsh's household. This was the most painful distortion yet. Emma had struggled briefly after the divorce, understandably, and again last year when we had to move to a smaller apartment after James successfully fought to reduce his child support payments. But she had worked incredibly hard with support from her teachers and a counselor, and had brought her grades back up to mostly A's and B's by the current semester. Mr. Mitchell is prepared to provide the stable, structured environment that Emma needs during these critical teenage years. He has a secure home, a consistent schedule, and the resources to ensure Emma receives the support and opportunities she deserves." He is deeply concerned about his daughter's current trajectory and believes this modification is necessary for her future success and well-being. Gregory returned to his seat, and James nodded solemnly, the picture of a concerned father. I felt sick. Diane squeezed my arm gently before standing. Your Honor, if I may, Mr. Gregory's opening statement contains numerous allegations that are not only unsupported by evidence, but directly contradicted by the documentation we have provided to the court. You'll have your turn to present your case, Ms. Kaplan, Judge Powell said, though not unkindly. For now, Mr. Gregory, please call your first witness. The petitioner calls James Mitchell, Gregory announced. James walked to the witness stand. With confident strides, placed his hand on the Bible, and was sworn in. As he settled into the chair, he met my eyes briefly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. There was something in his expression I recognized from our marriage, that subtle hint of satisfaction when he knew he had the upper hand. For the next hour, I watched as James crafted a narrative that bore little resemblance to our reality. He spoke with measured concern about how increasingly worried he had become about my parenting. He described finding Emma alone and unfed when he came to pick her up for visitation, conveniently omitting that he had arrived 2 hours earlier than scheduled that day, when I had stepped out for 30 minutes to pick up her prescription, leaving our 15-year-old daughter with clear instructions and emergency contacts. He expressed deep concern about my emotional outbursts, citing a single incident when I had tearfully confronted him after he returned Emma 3 hours late without calling, causing us to miss her grandfather's birthday celebration. He mentioned inappropriate men around Emma, meaning the father of her best friend, who had driven them to soccer practice when my car was in the shop. Each distortion built upon the last, creating a picture of a woman I didn't recognize. A neglectful, emotionally volatile mother who prioritized everything above her child. I glanced back at Emma, whose face had grown increasingly pale as her father testified. She shook her head slightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Mitchell, Gregory said, approaching the final phase of his direct examination. Can you tell the court about the changes in Emma's academic performance? James adopted a grave expression. It's been heartbreaking to watch. Emma was always such a bright, engaged student, but over the past 2 years, her grades have dropped significantly. She's missed assignments, her test scores have declined, and according to her teachers, she often seems distracted or tired in class. And did you discuss these concerns with Ms. Walsh? Many times. James sighed, as if the weight of this burden was almost too much to bear. I've tried to talk to Rebecca about creating more structure for Emma, about limiting screen time, about making sure she gets enough sleep, but she dismisses my concerns or promises to address them and then doesn't follow through. Objection, Diane called. Speculation about whether Ms. Walsh followed through. Sustained, Judge Powell said. Please stick to what you know firsthand, Mr. Mitchell. Gregory nodded. Mr. Mitchell, based on your observations and experiences, do you believe Emma would benefit from a change in her primary residence? James looked directly at the judge, his expression the perfect blend of reluctance and conviction. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe it was absolutely necessary for Emma's well-being. I've tried everything else. I've offered support, suggested co-parenting counseling, adjusted my own schedule to be more available. But Emma's situation continues to deteriorate under her mother's care. As painful as this process is for everyone, I believe Emma needs the stability and structure I can provide. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, Gregory said, turning to Diane. Your witness. Diane approached the podium with measured steps. At 62, she lacked Gregory's polished sheen, but she had something more valuable. 30 years of experience seeing through performances exactly like the one James had just given. Mr. Mitchell, she began, her voice calm but firm. You've painted a concerning picture of Ms. Walsh's parenting. I'd like to explore that a bit further. You testified that Emma is often alone and unfed when you arrive for visitation. How many times has this occurred? James shifted slightly. Several times over the past year? Could you be more specific? 5 times? 10? 20? I didn't keep an exact count. Would it surprise you to learn that Emma's food diary, which was submitted as part of her health class assignment, and which we've provided to the court, shows regular nutritious meals prepared by her mother, or that Ms. Walsh's work schedule, also submitted to the court, shows she is home by 4:30 every weekday afternoon? James's jaw tightened. One document doesn't show the whole picture. I agree, Diane nodded. So let's look at another piece of the picture. You mentioned Ms. Walsh's emotional outbursts. How many of these outbursts have you personally witnessed? As I mentioned, there was the incident about Emma being returned late. There have been others when Rebecca called, me clearly agitated about schedule changes or decisions regarding Emma. So these outbursts were actually instances where Ms. Walsh expressed disagreement with you about parenting matters. They were more than disagreements. They were inappropriate emotional reactions. Inappropriate in what way? She would raise her voice, sometimes cry. Once she hung up on me. Diane raised an eyebrow. Mr. Mitchell, would you characterize expressing emotion as inherently inappropriate? No, but moving on, Diane continued. You expressed concern about Emma's academic performance. Are you aware that Emma's most recent progress report shows significant improvement, with her current GPA standing at 3.7? James frowned. I haven't seen that report. That's interesting, because it was sent to both parents' emails 3 weeks ago, and Ms. Walsh received a read receipt showing you opened it. Diane placed a document on the evidence table. We've provided a copy for the court. I watched as James's confident facade began to show tiny cracks. This was the James I knew from our marriage, smoothly convincing until confronted with concrete facts that contradicted his narrative. Mr. Mitchell, Diane continued, you indicated that you've tried everything to work with Ms. Walsh on co-parenting issues. Could you tell the court how many of the co-parenting classes ordered in your original divorce decree you completed? James's expression tightened further. I completed 2 sessions, but my work schedule made it difficult to attend the full course. And how many times have you been late returning Emma from visitation in the past year? I don't recall exactly. Would it refresh your recollection if I told you that Ms. Walsh has documented 17 instances where Emma was returned more than an hour after the agreed-upon time, without prior notification? My job requires flexibility. Rebecca knows that. Does your job also explain why you've exercised only 63% of your allotted visitation time over the past year? James's mask slipped further. I've had unavoidable work commitments and travel. I see. Diane nodded thoughtfully. So you believe Emma needs more stability and structure, but you've been unable to maintain a consistent visitation schedule, complete court-ordered co-parenting classes, or even read her academic reports. Is that accurate? You're mischaracterizing my involvement, James said, his voice taking on an edge I recognized, the tone that had always preceded his worst moments at home. My career demands are precisely why I'm seeking custody now. My situation has changed, and I can now provide the consistent presence Emma needs. What specifically has changed about your work situation, Mr. Mitchell? I've been promoted to regional director, which means less travel and more consistent hours. When did this promotion occur? 2 months ago. And before filing this petition for custody modification, did you attempt to use your new, more flexible schedule to fully exercise your existing visitation time with Emma? James hesitated. I wanted to establish a more comprehensive solution, rather than continue with an arrangement that isn't working. So that would be a no, Diane said. No further questions, Your Honor. As James returned to his seat, I noticed a slight tremble in his hands. The same tremble I used to see when things didn't go exactly according to his plan at home. Gregory leaned over to whisper something to him, and James nodded, his jaw set. "Mr. Gregory, do you have additional witnesses?" Judge Powell asked. "Yes, Your Honor. The petitioner calls Dr. Lawrence Forrester." A tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses approached the stand. After being sworn in, he introduced himself. As a child psychologist who had conducted an evaluation of Emma at James's request. "Dr. Forrester," Gregory began, "could you please share your professional observations regarding Emma Mitchell's current psychological state?" "Based on my evaluation, Emma displays several concerning indicators of emotional distress," Dr. Forrester stated in a clinical tone. "She exhibits symptoms of anxiety, particularly around transitions and authority figures. She shows signs of hypervigilance and expressed worries about her home environment that are atypical for adolescents in stable situations." My heart sank. Emma had met with this man exactly once, for 90 minutes after James had taken her to his office during a weekend visitation without informing me. She had come home upset, saying the doctor kept asking leading questions about how I behaved at home and whether she ever felt unsafe with me. "In your professional opinion, what might be causing these symptoms?" Gregory asked. "Such symptoms often develop in response to unpredictable or inconsistent parenting, emotional volatility in the home, or situations where a child feels responsible for a parent's emotional well-being." Gregory nodded gravely. "And based on your evaluation, do you have recommendations regarding Emma's custody arrangement?" Children exhibiting these symptoms typically benefit from highly structured, consistent environments with clear boundaries and expectations. Based solely on my evaluation of Emma, I would recommend placement with the parent who can provide the greatest stability and emotional consistency. I felt the blood drain from my face. This man had spent less than 2 hours with my daughter and was now making recommendations that could tear apart our lives. Diane had warned me this might happen, that James would bring in an expert who had only seen the narrow slice of information he had provided. When it was Diane's turn to cross-examine, she approached the podium with several folders in hand. "Dr. Forrester, how many sessions did you have with Emma?" "One 90-minute evaluation." "Did you meet with Ms. Walsh as part of your evaluation process?" "No, I did not." "Did you review Emma's school records or speak with her regular therapist, Dr. Monica Chen, whom she has been seeing for the past 3 years?" Dr. Forrester shifted slightly. "I reviewed the records provided by Mr. Mitchell, which included some school reports. I did not contact Emma's therapist." "Were you aware that Dr. Chen has submitted a report to this court describing Emma as well-adjusted given the circumstances of her parents' divorce, and noting significant progress in managing anxiety that appears primarily related to her father's inconsistent presence in her life?" I was not provided with that information. Diane placed another document on the evidence table. "Did Mr. Mitchell inform you that Emma's school counselor has documented that her periods of academic difficulty coincided specifically with instances when her father canceled planned visits or failed to attend important school events he had committed to?" "No, that information was not shared with me." "One final question, Dr. Forrester. In forming your professional opinion about what would benefit Emma, did you consider the potential psychological impact of removing a 15-year-old girl from the primary caregiver she has lived with consistently throughout her life?" Dr. Forrester hesitated. "Any transition would need to be handled carefully, of course." "Thank you, Dr. Forrester. No further questions." As the doctor stepped down, I felt a small spark of hope. Diane was methodically exposing the gaps in James's case, showing how selective and misleading his evidence was. But my hope dimmed when Gregory called his next witness, Sandra Mitchell, James's mother. For the next 30 minutes, I listened, as my former mother-in-law described me as always high-strung and never quite suited to motherhood. She recounted incidents from years ago, a time I had forgotten to bring extra diapers to her house when Emma was an infant, an occasion when I had been late picking Emma up from her house because of a flat tire. Each minor, normal parenting moment was presented as evidence of my fundamental inadequacy. Rebecca always seemed overwhelmed by motherhood, Sandra concluded with a sad shake of her head. James, on the other hand, has always had a natural connection with Emma. She lights up around her father. When Diane cross-examined Sandra, she established that the woman had seen Emma exactly 4 times in the past year, despite living only 30 minutes away. She also got Sandra to admit that she had never once offered to help me with childcare after the divorce, despite her professed concern for her granddaughter's well-being. By the time Gregory announced, "The petitioner rests, Your Honor," I felt emotionally drained. The narrative they had constructed bore so little resemblance to our lives that it was disorienting. In their version, I was unstable, neglectful, and emotionally manipulative, while James was the concerned, capable father reluctantly stepping in to rescue his daughter. Judge Powell called for a 30-minute recess before we would present our "Asta." As people began to move around the courtroom, I remained seated, trying to steady my breathing. "You're doing great," Diane whispered. "Their case has significant weaknesses that we'll expose even further when it's our turn. Dr. Chen's testimony will be particularly powerful." I nodded, but couldn't find words. Emma slipped into the seat beside me as soon as the bailiff allowed her to approach. "It's all lies," she said fiercely, her voice low. "How can they just say things that aren't true in court?" "They're presenting their perspective, honey," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "Our side gets to present the truth next." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Dad looks so smug, like he thinks he's already won." "Let's step outside for a few minutes," I suggested, not wanting Emma to see how shaken I was. "Get some air." We walked silently to a small courtyard outside the courthouse. The spring air was cool and fresh after the stuffiness of the courtroom. Cherry trees were blooming, their pink petals occasionally drifting down around us. It seemed wrong that nature could be so beautiful on a day when my world felt like it was imploding. Emma paced back and forth, her agitation visible in every movement. "Mom, if they believe all that stuff about you, if they take me away, that's not going to happen," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Diane is very good at her job, and we have facts on our side." Emma stopped pacing and turned to face me. "But what if it's not enough? Dad can be so convincing when he wants to be." I knew exactly what she meant. James had always been able to charm people, teachers, neighbors, colleagues, even therapists. It was part of why our divorce had been so difficult. Few people believed my accounts of his controlling behavior because he presented such a different face to the world. "The truth matters in court," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. "And Judge Powell seems fair. She'll see through the contradictions in their case." Emma looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "Mom," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the spring breeze. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I've been recording Dad. When he picks me up, when he calls, when we're at his house. I've been doing it for months." I stared at her, stunned. "Emma, that might not be legal, and it definitely wouldn't be admissible in court." "I know. I looked it up. Connecticut is a 2-party consent state for recordings. But I wasn't doing it for court, at least not at first. I started doing it because I kept feeling crazy after spending time with him. He'd tell me one thing when we were alone, then say something completely different to Vanessa or to his friends. He'd promise things and then deny ever saying them. My heart broke for my daughter, who had been carrying this burden alone. This was exactly how James had made me feel throughout our marriage, constantly off balance, questioning my own memories and perceptions. "The thing is," Emma continued, Last weekend, he forgot I was in the house when he was talking to Grandma Sandra in his office. They were discussing the custody case and, Mom, he admitted everything. He said he doesn't actually think you're unstable at all. He said he's only doing this because you refused to sell him your half of the lake house property, and because his lawyer told him that if he gets primary custody, he can get the child support reduced to almost nothing. I felt lightheaded. The lake house had been my parents' retirement home, left to me after they died in a car accident 2 years ago. It was the one significant asset I had, and I'd refused to sell my half to James because I wanted to keep it for Emma eventually. The property had been a point of contention ever since I inherited it. Emma, honey, I appreciate you trying to help, but we can't use recordings made without consent. It would probably make things worse if we tried. But it's the truth! Emma's voice rose in frustration. He's lying about everything, and I have proof. I know, and it's not fair, I agreed, feeling the weight of that unfairness acutely. But we have to work within the system. Emma's expression hardened in a way that reminded me suddenly, painfully, of her father. We'll see about that, she said. Before I could respond, Catherine appeared at the courtyard entrance. They're reconvening, she called. Time to go back in. As we walked back toward the courtroom, Emma slipped her phone back into her pocket, her expression determined. I felt a flutter of anxiety, wondering what she was planning. But there was no time to pursue it as we re-entered the courtroom and took our places. Ms. Kaplan, you may present your case, Judge Powell directed once everyone was settled. Diane stood. Your Honor, the respondent calls Dr. Monica Chen. Emma's therapist took the stand, her presence calm and professional. Through Diane's questioning, she described Emma as resilient and well-adjusted, despite the challenging circumstances of her parents' divorce. She testified that Emma had made significant progress in therapy, particularly in managing anxiety, that stemmed largely from uncertainty about her father's commitment to consistent involvement in her life. In your professional opinion, Diane asked, how would Emma be affected by a change in her primary residence at this time? Such a change would likely be deeply disruptive to the stability and security Emma has established, Dr. Chen replied. She has a strong support system in her current environment, friends, academic relationships, extracurricular activities, and most importantly, a secure attachment to her mother. Uprooting a 15-year-old from this network could trigger significant regression in the progress she's made. Gregory's cross-examination attempted to suggest that Dr. Chen was biased because she had been selected by me initially, but her responses remained measured and professional, backed by 3 years of detailed notes and observations. Next, Diane called Emma's English teacher, Ms. Patel, who testified about Emma's academic improvement over the past semester, and described her as engaged, thoughtful, and clearly well-supported at home. The school counselor, followed, confirming that Emma's periodic academic struggles had indeed coincided with disruptions in her father's visitation schedule. Finally, it was my turn to testify. As I took the stand and was sworn in, I tried to remember everything Diane had coached me on. Speak clearly, stick to facts, don't let emotion overwhelm me. Through Diane's careful questioning, I was able to address each of James's allegations with documentation. Records of Emma's medical appointments, school meetings I had attended, the meals and routines we maintained, the support systems I had put in place for her. I explained my work as a part-time librarian, which I had chosen specifically because it allowed me to be home when Emma returned from school each day. When Gregory cross-examined me, his approach was aggressive from the start. Ms. Walsh, isn't it true that you were prescribed antidepressants following your divorce? Yes, I saw a therapist after the divorce and was briefly prescribed medication to help manage situational depression. And didn't you miss several days of work during that period due to your emotional state? I took 3 sick days over 6 months, which is within the normal range for any employee. Ms. Walsh, How many men have you dated since your divorce? Diane objected immediately. Relevance, Your Honor. I'm establishing the level of instability in the home environment, Gregory argued. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, counsel, Judge Powell warned. I dated one person seriously about 2 years after the divorce, I answered. The relationship lasted 6 months. And did this man stay overnight at your home while Emma was present? No, never. He and Emma met several times for dinner or activities, but he never stayed overnight when she was home. Really? Never? Gregory's tone was skeptical. Not even once? Not even once, I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. Gregory switched tactics abruptly. Ms. Walsh, would you describe yourself as an angry person? I was taken aback by the shift. No, I wouldn't. Have you ever raised your voice to Mr. Mitchell during exchanges of your daughter? There have been occasions when conversations became tense, particularly when visitation schedules were changed last minute without consideration for Emma's activities. That's not what I asked. Have you raised your voice to Mr. Mitchell? Yes or no? Yes, on rare occasions. Have you spoken negatively about Mr. Mitchell to your daughter? I've made a conscious effort not to disparage Emma's father in front of her. I believe children should form their own opinions of their parents. Gregory's eyes narrowed. So you're claiming you've never said anything negative about Mr. Mitchell to Emma? Never complained about late child support payments or canceled visits? I chose my words carefully. I have factually explained situations to Emma when necessary, such as when plans needed to change because a payment was late or a visit was canceled. But I've avoided expressing personal frustrations about her father to her. Gregory continued his aggressive questioning for another 20 minutes, trying to provoke an emotional response. I focused on breathing slowly, answering truthfully, but calmly. When he finally said, "No further questions," I felt exhausted but intact. Diane stood for redirect. Ms. Walsh, what is your primary concern in this custody matter? I looked directly at the judge. My concern is Emma's well-being and stability. She has built a life in our community, with friends, activities, and support systems that have helped her thrive despite the challenges of the divorce. At 15, these connections are crucial to her development and sense of security. I believe maintaining consistency in her primary home environment is vital for her continued growth and happiness. Thank you, Ms. Walsh, Diane said. No further questions. As I returned to my seat, I glanced at Emma, who gave me a slight nod. There was something in her expression I couldn't quite read, determination mixed with something else. Does the respondent have any further witnesses? Judge Powell asked. Yes, Your Honor, Diane replied. We call Emma Mitchell. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Emma walked to the witness stand. At 15, she was legally old enough for the judge to consider her preferences, but testifying put her in the painful position of publicly choosing between her parents. We had discussed whether she should testify at all, and Emma had insisted she wanted to speak for herself. After being sworn in, Emma sat with remarkable composure for a teenager in such a stressful situation. She answered Diane's initial questions clearly about her school life, her activities, her relationships with each parent. Emma, Diane asked gently, can you tell the court about your living arrangements with your mother? I have my own room in our apartment. Mom has created a really stable environment for me. We have routines, dinner together every night, homework time, weekend activities. When things have been tough, like when I was struggling with algebra, last semester, Mom arranged for tutoring and sat with me every night until I understood the concepts. And how would you characterize your relationship with your mother? She's my rock, Emma said simply. She's always there for me, even when things are hard. She listens to me. She respects me. She guides me without controlling me. Thank you, Emma. Can you tell the court about your time with your father? Emma's composure faltered slightly. I love my dad, but things are less predictable with him. Sometimes visits get canceled last minute because of work. Sometimes plans change without warning. It's harder to know what to expect. Your father has suggested that your mother is emotionally unstable and that her parenting has negatively affected you. What's your response to that? Emma's eyes flashed. That's completely untrue. Mom is the most stable person I know. She's been consistent and supportive even when things were really difficult after the divorce. Thank you, Emma. No further questions. Gregory approached for cross-examination. His expression softened into what I recognized as his sympathetic adult talking to a child persona. Emma, I know this is a difficult situation for you, he began. We all want what's best for you. Has your mother ever told you that your father doesn't want to spend time with you? Gregory asked, his voice gentle but his eyes calculating. Emma hesitated. No. When Dad cancels visits, Mom usually just tells me something came up with his work. I see. Gregory nodded thoughtfully. Emma, do you remember meeting with Dr. Forrester? Yes. And do you remember telling him that you sometimes feel anxious at home? Emma frowned. That's not exactly what I said. He asked if I ever feel anxious, and I said sometimes, like before tests or performances. Everyone does. Do you ever feel you need to take care of your mother emotionally? Emma's frown deepened. I don't understand what you mean. Do you ever worry about your mother's feelings? Do you ever feel responsible for her happiness? I care about my mom, if that's what you're asking. We care about each other. Gregory changed tactics. How would you feel about spending more time with your father? Perhaps living primarily with him? Emma's response was immediate. I wouldn't want that. I have my life established where I am now. My school, my friends, my activities, and Mom. And I have a good routine. Don't you think you could establish a similar routine with your father? He has expressed how much he wants to be more involved in your daily life. Emma's expression hardened slightly. If Dad wanted to be more involved in my daily life, he could have shown up for the things he already committed to. He's missed half my soccer games this season, even though they're on his weekends. He canceled our last 3 scheduled visits with less than a day's notice. Gregory's smile tightened. Teenagers often don't understand the demands of adult professional life. Your father works very hard to provide financial support. Objection, Diane called. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained, Judge Powell said. Mr. Gregory, please stick to questions. Gregory nodded. Emma, isn't it possible that your resistance to changing your living arrangement stems from fear of the unknown rather than any specific concern about living with your father? Emma sat up straighter. No, my resistance, as you call it, comes from knowing both my parents very well and understanding which home environment works better for me. One final question, Emma. Has your mother coached you on what to say today? Emma met his gaze steadily. No, sir. My mother told me to tell the truth. No further questions, Gregory said, returning to his seat with a slight frown. Diane stood for redirect. Emma, you mentioned your father has missed scheduled visits and activities. How does that affect you? It's disappointing, sometimes humiliating, like when he didn't show up for my solo in the spring concert after promising he'd be there, and I kept looking for him in the audience. But mostly it makes me feel unimportant, like I'm not a priority. Thank you, Emma. No further questions. As Emma stepped down, she glanced at her father, whose face remained impassive, then at me. I gave her a small smile of encouragement. She had done beautifully, speaking her truth with clarity and composure. Does the respondent have any additional witnesses? Judge Powell asked. No, Your Honor, Diane replied. The respondent rests. Very well, the judge nodded. Mr. Gregory, your rebuttal? Gregory stood. Your Honor, we recall Mr. Mitchell to the stand. James returned to the witness stand, his expression solemn. After being reminded he was still under oath, he listened attentively as Gregory began his questions. Mr. Mitchell, we've heard testimony suggesting you've been inconsistent in exercising your visitation with Emma. How do you respond to that? James's expression turned regretful. I acknowledge there have been times when work obligations have forced me to reschedule visits with Emma, which I deeply regret. What hasn't been mentioned is how often Rebecca has made those visits difficult, scheduling competing activities during my weekends, sending Emma with homework that supposedly can only be completed at her house, creating situations where Emma feels torn between spending time with me and missing out on something important. I bit my lip to keep from protesting aloud at this blatant mischaracterization. I had bent over backwards to protect Emma's time with her father, often rearranging my own schedule and other commitments. Your daughter testified that she prefers to remain in her current living situation. What's your response to that? James sighed heavily. I love Emma more than anything, and of course I take her feelings seriously. But at 15, she doesn't fully understand what's at stake here. Children often resist change, even when it's ultimately beneficial. I believe Emma has been subtly influenced to view any change in custody as a rejection of her mother, rather than what it truly is, an opportunity for her to thrive in a more structured, stable environment. No further questions, Gregory said. Diane approached for cross-examination. Mr. Mitchell, you suggested that Ms. Walsh makes visitation difficult by scheduling competing activities during your weekends. Are you aware that Emma's soccer schedule is set by the league, not by her mother? Yes, but... And are you aware that the school calendar, including concerts and academic competitions, is established months in advance and shared with both parents? Of course, but... So these activities that supposedly compete with your visitation are actually regular parts of Emma's life that you could plan around if you chose to, correct? James's jaw tightened. It's more complicated than that. My work schedule doesn't always allow for the flexibility to accommodate every school event. I see. Yet you're testifying that you could provide more stability and structure than Ms. Walsh, despite your professional commitments making it difficult for you to maintain consistent visitation. Is that correct? My circumstances have changed. I've taken steps to ensure I can be more available going forward. You mentioned these steps earlier, a promotion 2 months ago. Have you used this new flexibility to attend any of Emma's events or activities? In the past 2 months? James hesitated. There haven't been many opportunities yet. Actually, Diane said, consulting her notes, in the past 2 months, Emma has had 4 soccer games, a science fair, and a choir concert. Did you attend any of these events? No, but I had legitimate conflicts. So despite this new flexibility, you claim, nothing has actually changed in terms of your availability for Emma's activities. Is that a fair statement? James shifted, uncomfortably. As I said, it's a transition period. One last question, Mr. Mitchell. If you were granted primary custody of Emma, who would care for her after school and during your work hours? I have resources to ensure she's properly supervised. My mother has offered to help, and Vanessa works from home several days a week. So Emma would be cared for by her grandmother, who testified she's seen Emma only 4 times in the past year, or by your girlfriend rather than by you personally. Meanwhile, Ms. Walsh has arranged her work schedule specifically to be home when Emma returns from school. Is that correct? James's expression hardened. I would provide appropriate supervision for my daughter. No further questions, Diane said, returning to her seat. Judge Powell looked between the parties. Are there any additional witnesses for rebuttal? Gregory shook his head. No, Your Honor. Very well, we'll take a 15-minute recess, and then I'll hear closing arguments. As the judge left the courtroom, I exhaled slowly, feeling drained. The testimony had gone better than I'd feared, but James had always been persuasive. I wondered how much weight the judge would give to Emma's clear preference to stay with me. "You're doing great," Diane reassured me quietly. "The judge seems to be seeing through the inconsistencies in their case." Emma slipped into the seat beside me. "Are we winning?" she whispered. "It's not really about winning or losing," I said automatically, then caught myself. "But yes, I think we made a strong case." Emma nodded, her expression serious. "Good, because Plan B is a last resort." "Plan B?" I asked, suddenly alert. "Emma, what are you planning?" She shook her head slightly. "Nothing illegal, just insurance." Before I could press further, the bailiff called us back to order as Judge Powell returned. Gregory delivered his closing argument first, emphasizing James's concerns about my stability and Emma's need for structure during her formative teenage years. He painted a picture of a devoted father who only wanted what was best for his daughter. Then it was Diane's turn. Her closing argument was masterful, methodically contrasting the concrete evidence of my consistent care for Emma with James's pattern of unpredictability and selective involvement. She emphasized the professional opinions of Emma's therapist and teachers, as well as Emma's own clearly stated preference. "Your Honor," Diane concluded, "this case isn't about which parent loves Emma more. Both clearly care deeply for their daughter. It's about which environment provides the stability, consistency, and support that Emma needs. The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Ms. Walsh has created exactly that environment, despite significant challenges. Uprooting a 15-year-old from her established home, school, and support network would serve no purpose except to satisfy Mr. Mitchell's desire for control. We ask the court to maintain the current custody arrangement, which has demonstrably served Emma's best interests." Judge Powell thanked both attorneys and announced she would take the matter under advisement. "Given the importance of stability in the child's life, I'll issue my ruling promptly. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 2 p.m. As we gathered our things to leave, James approached with Gregory. "Rebecca," he said, his voice low, "it's not too late to be reasonable about this. We could still reach an agreement outside of court." The implied threat was clear. Give him what he wanted or face the consequences. "Any communication should go through counsel," Diane interjected smoothly. "Ms. Walsh won't be discussing this matter directly." James's expression darkened, but he nodded and moved away. As he passed Emma, he touched her shoulder. "See you tomorrow, sweetheart." Emma stiffened but said nothing. The drive home was quiet. Emma stared out the window while I tried to process everything that had happened. Catherine had returned to her family, promising to come back for tomorrow's ruling. It was just Emma and me now, in our small apartment that suddenly felt vulnerable, as if the walls themselves might be taken from us by tomorrow's decision. "Are you hungry?" I asked as we entered, trying to establish some normalcy. "Not really," Emma replied, dropping her bag on the couch. "But we should eat something anyway." I smiled, despite my exhaustion. This was so typical of Emma, practical even in crisis. "How about breakfast for dinner? Pancakes?" "Sounds good." She hesitated, then asked, "Mom, are you worried about tomorrow?" I considered deflecting, then decided against it. Emma deserved honesty. "Yes, a little. But Diane made a strong case, and Judge Powell seems fair." Emma nodded slowly. "Dad looked confident." "Your father always looks confident," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It doesn't mean he's right." We made pancakes together, moving around our small kitchen in the familiar choreography we'd established over years. As we ate, Emma kept checking her phone, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just some texts from Dad," she said vaguely. "Nothing important." After dinner, Emma retreated to her room while I cleaned up. I tried to distract myself with mindless television, but found I couldn't focus. Around 10, I knocked softly on Emma's door. "Come in," she called. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed still fully dressed, her laptop open beside her and her phone in her hand. "Shouldn't you be getting ready for bed? Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "In a minute," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I'm just finishing something." I sat on the edge of her bed. Whatever happens tomorrow, it's going to be fine," she interrupted, with such certainty that I was taken aback. "I hope so, but if it's not—" "Mom." She finally looked up, her expression serious beyond her years. "Do you trust me?" "Of course I do, but—" "Then trust me now. It's going to be okay." Something in her tone made me pause. "Emma, what have you done?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Nothing yet, but I'm prepared." "Prepared for what?" She locked her phone and set it aside. "For whatever happens, that's all I'm going to say right now." I wanted to press further, but the determined set of her jaw told me it would be futile. Whatever she was planning, she wouldn't be dissuaded. "Just promise me you won't do anything that could get you in trouble," I said. "I promise." She leaned forward and hugged me, something she did less often now that she was 15 and increasingly independent. "Everything's going to work out. I won't let him take me away from you." I hugged her back, trying to draw strength from her certainty. "I love you, Em." "Love you too, Mom." I slept fitfully that night, my dreams filled with courtrooms and judges and James's confident smile. I woke at dawn, exhausted but too anxious to stay in bed. I found Emma already in the kitchen making coffee. "You're up early," I observed. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, handing me a mug. "Too much thinking." We spent the morning in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of normal life while waiting for the clock to edge toward our 2 p.m. court time. Diane called around 11 to check in. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "As well as can be expected," I replied. "Any insights on what the judge might decide?" "It's always hard to predict, but I feel good about our case. Judge Powell seemed particularly attentive during Emma's testimony and Dr. Chen's professional assessment. And if it doesn't go our way, then we appeal, but let's cross that bridge if we come to it." After I hung up, I found Emma sitting at the kitchen table, methodically organizing a folder of papers. "What's all that?" I asked. She closed the folder quickly. "Just some homework I'm getting ahead on." I didn't believe her for a second, but I also didn't have the energy for another cryptic conversation. "We should leave in about an hour. Do you want lunch before we go?" "I'm not hungry," she said, standing up with the folder clutched to her chest. "I'll just go change." At 1:30, we arrived at the courthouse. Diane met us in the lobby, her expression carefully neutral. "Any word from opposing counsel?" I asked. She shook her head. "Gregory plays his cards close to the chest. They're probably already inside." As we approached the courtroom, I saw James and Vanessa standing near the doors, heads bent in conversation. When James spotted us, he straightened, his expression unreadable. Vanessa gave me a small, uncomfortable smile. Emma kept her eyes forward, not acknowledging either of them as we passed. Inside the courtroom, we took our seats. The atmosphere felt charged, like the air before a storm. At precisely 2 p.m., Judge Powell entered, and we all rose. After she took her seat, she surveyed the room seriously. "I've considered all testimony and evidence in this matter carefully," she began. "Custody determinations are always complex, requiring the court to balance multiple factors with the child's best interests as the paramount concern." My heart raced as she continued. "In this case, we have two parents who clearly love their daughter, though they have very different perspectives on what arrangement would best serve her needs." Judge Powell reviewed the key points from both sides' presentations, nodding as she consulted her notes. "Mr. Mitchell has expressed concerns about stability and structure in the child's current environment. However, the evidence presented suggests that Ms. Walsh has maintained a consistent, supportive household, despite the challenges of single parenthood. I felt a flutter of hope. Was she leaning in our direction? On the other hand, she continued, Mr. Mitchell offers certain resources and opportunities that could benefit Emma, particularly as she approaches college age. The flutter stilled. What resources? James's financial situation was only marginally better than mine, and I had been the one researching college options with Emma. Additionally, the court must consider the preference of the child, particularly given Emma's age and demonstrated maturity. Her testimony was clear and well-reasoned. Judge Powell paused, looking down at her notes once more. Based on all factors, I am inclined to maintain the current primary custody arrangement with Ms. Walsh, with some modifications to the visitation, scheduled to potentially allow for more consistent involvement from Mr. Mitchell. Relief flooded through me. I reached for Emma's hand and found it already extended toward mine. However, Judge Powell continued, before issuing a final ruling, I want to address one matter that has been troubling me throughout these proceedings. The relief evaporated, replaced by a new tension. Mr. Mitchell, would you approach the bench, please? You as well, Ms. Walsh. Attorneys may accompany their clients. James and I both rose, followed by our lawyers, and approached the judges. Bench? Judge Powell lowered her voice so that only the four of us could hear. During a break in yesterday's proceedings, I received a concerning communication. An anonymous email was sent to my clerk containing an audio file. She glanced between James and me. This audio appears to be a recording of Mr. Mitchell discussing this case with his mother, making statements that directly contradict his testimony in this court. James paled. Your Honor, I don't know anything about this. Whatever this recording is, it must be fabricated or taken out of context. Judge Powell's expression remained stern. The recording includes statements about using claims of Ms. Walsh's instability as a strategy to gain leverage in property disputes, specifically regarding a lake house. It also includes admissions that you do not actually believe Ms. Walsh is unfit or unstable. I felt dizzy. This must be what Emma had been referring to, her insurance policy. But how had she gotten the recording to the judge? Your Honor, Gregory interjected. Any such recording would be inadmissible as evidence. Connecticut is a two-party consent state for recordings. I'm well aware of the evidentiary rules, counsel, Judge Powell replied. I'm not admitting this recording as evidence. I'm addressing an apparent attempt to perpetrate a fraud upon this court. She turned her attention back to James. Mr. Mitchell, while I cannot use this recording as the basis for my custody determination, I would be remiss in my duty if I did not address the serious ethical concerns it raises. If you have made false statements under oath regarding your ex-wife's fitness as a parent, that would constitute perjury. James's face had gone from pale to ashen. Your Honor, I can explain. I suggest you consult with your attorney before saying anything further, Judge Powell interrupted. For now, we will proceed with my ruling based solely on the admissible evidence and testimony presented during these proceedings. She dismissed us back to our seats. As I walked back, I caught Emma's eye. Her expression was neutral, but there was a glint of something like satisfaction in her gaze. Judge Powell cleared her throat and addressed the courtroom. After careful consideration of all factors, including the testimony of both parents, the child, and expert witnesses, as well as the documentary evidence presented, I find that it is in Emma's best interest to remain in her mother's primary custody. The current arrangements regarding legal custody, decision-making authority, and child support will remain unchanged. I exhaled slowly, squeezing Emma's hand. We had won. However, Judge Powell continued, I am ordering the parties to engage in co-parenting counseling to address communication issues and establish more consistent visitation. Mr. Mitchell's visitation schedule will remain as previously ordered, with the understanding that consistency and reliability are essential to Emma's well-being. She looked directly at James. The court takes very seriously any suggestion that proceedings have been manipulated for purposes other than the child's best interests. While I have made my determination based solely on admissible evidence, I strongly caution both parties to maintain complete honesty and transparency in all future proceedings. With that, she concluded the hearing. As soon as Judge Powell left the courtroom, James stormed over to us, his face flushed with anger. "What did you do?" he demanded, glaring at me. "How did you get that recording to the judge?" Diane stepped between us. "Mr. Mitchell, I suggest you direct any questions through counsel." "This isn't over," James said, his voice low. "You think you've won, but—" "Dad," Emma interrupted, stepping forward. "It's over." James blinked, seemingly surprised by her intervention. "Emma, honey, you don't understand what's happening here." "I understand perfectly," she replied, her voice steady. "I understand that you lied. About Mom. About why you wanted custody. About everything." His expression shifted from anger to calculation. "Sweetheart, your mother has clearly been—" "Stop." Emma held up her hand. "I'm the one who recorded you. When you were talking to Grandma about using me to get the lake house. When you said Mom wasn't actually unstable, but it was a good strategy. When you laughed about how the judge would believe you because you're so much more put together than Mom." James went completely still. "You did what?" "I recorded you. Multiple times. Because I knew you were lying and I needed proof. For myself, if nothing else." Emma's voice remained calm, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. "I didn't send it to the judge. I sent it to her clerk from a temporary email address I created at the library. I knew it wouldn't be admissible as evidence, but I also knew she should hear the truth." James stared at his daughter, seemingly at a loss for words. Gregory placed a hand on his client's arm. "James, we should discuss this privately." "You betrayed me," James finally said to Emma, his voice hollow. "Your own father." Emma shook her head. "No, Dad. You betrayed me. You were willing to use me as a pawn to hurt Mom and get property. You didn't care how it would affect me to be taken away from my home, my school, my friends, from the parent who's actually been there for me consistently." "Emma, please." "I still love you," she said, her voice finally breaking slightly. "You're my dad, but I don't trust you anymore, and I won't let you hurt Mom or take me away from her." James looked from Emma to me, then back to his daughter. Something in his expression shifted. Resignation, perhaps, or the realization that he had truly lost something precious. "This conversation isn't over," he said finally, but the fight had gone out of his voice. He turned and walked away, Gregory following close behind. When they were gone, Emma's composure crumbled. I pulled her into my arms as she began to cry. "I'm sorry," she sobbed against my shoulder. "I know I shouldn't have recorded him without consent. I know it was wrong. But I was so scared he would win." "Shh," I soothed, stroking her hair. "It's okay. It's going to be okay." Diane watched, us with a mixture of concern and admiration. "That was incredibly brave, Emma, and risky. But I understand why you felt you had to do it." Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I couldn't let him take me away from Mom, and I couldn't let him keep lying about her. It wasn't fair." "Life rarely is," Diane said gently. "But the judge made the right decision today, even without considering the recording. The evidence was on your side." As we gathered our things to leave, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that we had won, pride in Emma's courage, concern about the road ahead with James, and a bone-deep exhaustion from the stress of the past weeks. Outside the courthouse, the spring air felt different somehow, fresher, full of possibility. Emma looped her arm through mine as we walked to the car. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home," I said simply. "We go home, and we continue building our life together, one day at a time." "Do you think Dad will try again?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know. The judge made her opinion very clear, and your father knows now that you're old enough to speak for yourself convincingly. But more importantly, he knows you see him clearly now." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's what hurts the most, actually. Not that I recorded him, but that I heard him. That I know what he really thinks." My heart ached for her. No child should have to face such disillusionment about a parent. "I'm so sorry, Em." "Don't be," she said, squeezing my arm. "I'd rather know the truth, even when it hurts. You taught me that." As we drove home, I glanced at my remarkable daughter in the passenger seat. No longer a child, not quite an adult, but wise beyond her years. She had fought for our family in her own way, taking an enormous risk because she believed in the truth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together. That evening, as we sat on our small balcony watching the sunset, Emma said quietly, "You know what I realized today? All those years Dad made you feel small and invisible? He was wrong. You're the strongest person I know." I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by her words. "We're both strong," I said finally, "and we're even stronger together." Emma smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder as the sky turned gold, then pink, then purple. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself fully relax. We were safe. We were home. We were exactly where we belonged. The weeks following the custody hearing brought a strange new rhythm to our lives. The constant dread that had been my companion for months had lifted, replaced by cautious optimism. James had retreated into silence, canceling his next 2 weekends with Emma without explanation. I worried about how this was affecting her, but she seemed almost relieved by the temporary distance. "It's not that I don't want to see him," she explained when I asked if she was okay with the canceled visits. "I just need time to figure out how to be around him now. Everything's different." I understood completely. The revelation in court had shifted something fundamental between father and daughter. Emma had seen behind the carefully maintained facade her father presented to the world, and that knowledge couldn't be unlearned. The first real test came 3 weeks after the hearing, when James texted to say he would be picking Emma up for his scheduled weekend. I found her in her room, staring at her phone with a troubled expression. "Dad's coming tomorrow," she said when I knocked on her doorframe. "Are you okay with that?" I asked, sitting beside her on the bed. She shrugged. "I have to see him sometime. Might as well be now." "You don't have to if you're not ready. Judge Powell ordered counseling before visitation resumes." Emma shook her head. "I don't want to make things worse. Besides, I'm not afraid of him. I'm just disappointed." The maturity in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the first time in recent weeks that I'd glimpsed the young woman emerging from the girl I'd raised. "You know," I said carefully, "it's okay to still love your dad while being angry with him. Feelings are complicated that way." "I know," she nodded. "I do still love him, but I don't think I'll ever look at him the same way again." The next morning, James arrived precisely at 10 a.m. I opened the door to find him looking uncharacteristically casual in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual business attire. His face was drawn, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. "Rebecca," he nodded stiffly. "James," I replied, stepping back to let him in. "Emma's just finishing getting ready. Would you like some coffee while you wait?" He seemed surprised by the offer. "No. Thank you." An awkward silence fell between us. In all our years together, even through the worst of our divorce, James had never been at a loss for words. Now he stood in my living room like a stranger, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes darting around as if seeking a safe place to land. How have you been? I asked, more to break the silence than out of genuine curiosity. He gave a short, humorless laugh. How do you think? I might have felt sympathetic if his tone hadn't carried that familiar edge of accusation, as if his current discomfort were somehow my fault rather than the natural consequence of his own actions. I wasn't trying to antagonize you, James, just making conversation. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Sorry, it's been a difficult few weeks. Vanessa and I broke up. That caught me by surprise. Vanessa had seemed fully committed to their relationship, already planning their life with Emma as if custody were a foregone conclusion. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Whatever my feelings about James, I didn't wish unhappiness on him. He shrugged. It was coming for a while. The custody situation just accelerated things. Before I could respond, Emma appeared from her bedroom, overnight bag in hand. She paused when she saw her father, her expression guarded. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetheart, James said, his voice softening instantly. Ready to go? She nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. Where are we going? I thought we'd head up to the lake, maybe do some hiking if the weather holds. He glanced at me. I've rented a cabin about 20 minutes from your mother's property, actually. I felt a flicker of unease. The lake house my parents had left me, the property that had been central to James's custody ploy, was a sensitive subject. Was this his way of acknowledging what had happened, or another manipulation? That sounds nice, Emma said carefully. I've got homework to do, though. We can make time for that, James assured her quickly. Whatever you need. The awkwardness was palpable as Emma gave me a quick hug goodbye. I'll call you tonight, she whispered. Have a good time, I said, meaning it despite my concerns. Whatever had happened between them, James was still her father, and she needed that relationship to be as healthy as possible. After they left, the apartment felt suddenly empty. I'd grown accustomed to our weekends together during James's recent absences, making pancakes on Saturday mornings, going for long walks in the afternoon, watching movies until too late at night. Now I had 2 days stretching before me with no responsibilities, no one to care for but myself. It was a strange feeling, both liberating and disorienting. In the 16 years since Emma was born, I'd rarely had time truly to myself. Even during James's regular visitation weekends, I'd usually filled the hours with errands, household chores, or work brought home from the library. On impulse, I called Catherine. What are you doing this weekend? I asked when she answered. The usual chaos, she laughed. Tyler has a soccer tournament, Maddie has ballet, and Zach has managed to get himself grounded again. Why? Emma's with James. I was thinking of driving up to the lake house, maybe staying overnight. Want to escape the chaos and join me? There was a pause. Then Catherine said, Yes, absolutely yes. John can handle the kids for one night. When are you leaving? 2 hours later, we were on the highway, windows down, singing along to the same playlist we'd made for road trips in college. Catherine's presence beside me felt like a tether to a version of myself I'd almost forgotten. The Rebecca who existed before she became Mrs. Mitchell, before she became Emma's mom, before the slow erosion of her confidence under James's subtle criticism. God, I've missed this, Catherine sighed as we turned onto the familiar wooded road leading to the lake. When was the last time we came up here together? Just the two of us? Before Emma was born, I realized. James never liked it when I went places without him. Catherine's expression darkened. I never understood what you saw in him, Beck, even in the beginning. He wasn't always like he is now, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if that were true. Had James changed, or had I simply been unable to see him clearly through the haze of early love? He could be incredibly charming, attentive. He made me feel like the center of his universe. Until he didn't. Catherine said quietly. Until he didn't, I agreed. The lake house came into view as we rounded the final curve, a modest A-frame. Nestled among tall pines, its deck extending over the water. It looked smaller than I remembered, but no less perfect. My parents had bought it as their retirement dream, spending only 2 precious years here before the accident that took them both. It still feels like them, Catherine said as we carried our overnight bags inside. The interior was just as they had left it. Simple, comfortable furniture, bookshelves crammed with mystery novels and field guides, my father's fishing tackle organized meticulously in the corner. I've been afraid to change anything, I admitted, even though it's been 2 years. Catherine squeezed my shoulder. You don't have to change a thing, but you are allowed to make it yours, you know? They would want that. We spent the afternoon on the deck, talking and laughing like we hadn't in years. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the lake, Catherine asked the question I'd been dreading. Have you told Emma about your plans yet? I shook my head. It hasn't seemed like the right time with everything that's happened, and I'm not entirely sure I'm going through with it anyway. Rebecca Walsh, Catherine said firmly, using the same tone she used with her children when they were being ridiculous. You've wanted to open your own bookstore since we were in college. You have the perfect location. She gestured at the lake house. You have the settlement money from the insurance. What's really holding you back? I stared out at the lake, trying to articulate the doubt that had been plaguing me. What if I fail? What if I pour everything into this dream and it falls apart? What would that teach Emma about taking risks? What does staying safe in a job that doesn't fulfill you teach her? Catherine countered. You're a librarian who dreams of owning a bookstore. That's hardly a radical career change. You know books, you know readers, and you know this community. The only thing you don't know is if you can do it, and you'll never know that unless you try. As darkness fell, we moved inside and opened a bottle of wine. My phone chimed with a text from Emma. Everything okay? Catherine asked as I read it. I think so, I said, feeling a mixture of relief and something else I couldn't quite name. She says they're at the cabin and everything's fine. Not great, not terrible, just fine. That's teenager speak for nothing dramatic to report, Catherine assured me. She'll call if she needs you. Later, as we sat by the fireplace with our second glasses of wine, Catherine asked, Have you thought about dating again? The question startled me. Honestly? No. Between work, Emma, and the custody battle, there hasn't been time. And after James. I trailed off, not sure how to finish the thought. Not all men are like James, Catherine said gently. I know that intellectually, but the idea of letting someone new into our lives, someone who could potentially hurt Emma if things went wrong, it terrifies me. What about someone who could make both your lives better if things went right? I smiled at her persistence. One major life change at a time, okay? Let me figure out the bookstore first. The next morning, we hiked along the lakeshore, planning what the space could look like transformed into a bookstore. The main floor was already open concept, perfect for shelving and reading areas. The loft could become a children's section, with comfortable cushions and low shelves. You could host events on the deck in summer, Catherine suggested. Author readings, book clubs, maybe even small concerts. The more we talked, the more real it felt. Not just a dream anymore, but a possibility. A future I could actually reach out and grasp. When we returned to the house, I was surprised to see James's rental car in the driveway. Emma was sitting on the front steps, her father standing awkwardly nearby. Everything okay? I asked, hurrying toward them. Fine, Emma said quickly. Dad just thought I might want to see the lake house while we were up here. Is that okay? Of course, I said, though the unexpected visit left me slightly off balance. Would you like to come in? James hesitated. If you don't mind. Catherine gave me a significant look before announcing, I think I'll take another walk around the lake, give you all some family time. As she disappeared down the path, I led James and Emma inside. James looked around with undisguised interest. He had visited the lake house only once before, for a tense weekend with my parents shortly after we were married. It hasn't changed much, he observed. No, I agreed. Not yet, anyway. Emma gave me a questioning look. Yet? I hadn't planned to have this conversation now, especially not with James present, but something about the moment felt right. I've been thinking about making some changes, I said. Actually, I've been considering turning the main floor into a bookstore. Really? Emma's eyes widened. Like, an actual business? Your own bookstore? I nodded, suddenly nervous about her reaction. It's just an idea right now. The location is perfect, right near the summer tourist traffic, but not too far from town for year-round business. And we could still use the upstairs as a getaway. Mom, that's amazing! Emma's face lit up with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen in weeks. You've talked about wanting your own bookstore forever. You have? James asked, sounding genuinely surprised. Since college, I confirmed, feeling a twinge of sadness that he'd never known this fundamental thing about me, or perhaps had known and forgotten. It was always the someday plan. Looks like someday might be closer than you thought, he said, glancing around the space with new eyes. It's a good location. The summer people up here would definitely support a bookstore. His assessment, practical and encouraging, caught me off guard. This wasn't the James I had grown accustomed to, the one who subtly undermined my ideas and confidence. Thanks, I said, unsure how else to respond. An awkward silence fell. Emma looked between us, then announced, I'm going to get my sketchbook from the car. I want to draw the lake before we leave. After she left, James cleared his throat. Rebecca, I owe you an apology. The words were so unexpected that for a moment I thought I'd misheard him. In 16 years of marriage and 5 years of divorce, James had never, not once, offered a genuine apology. I handled the custody situation badly, he continued when I didn't respond. Very badly. I let my anger about the lake house and the divorce cloud my judgment, and I put Emma in the middle of adult issues that should never have involved her. I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to detecting, but his expression seemed genuinely contrite. Why are you telling me this now? I asked cautiously. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache with old memories. Because Emma and I had a long talk last night. A real talk, maybe the first one we've ever had. She told me how my actions have affected her. Not just the custody case, but all of it. The canceled visits, the broken promises, the way I've talked about you over the years. He looked out the window toward the lake. She said something that really hit me. She said, Dad, I don't need you to win against Mom. I need you to be my father. I felt a surge of pride in my daughter's wisdom and courage. That sounds like Emma. She's remarkable, James agreed. And that's largely your doing, not mine. You've been the consistent parent, the one who put her needs first. He paused. The judge was right. Changing custody would have been about my ego, not Emma's well-being. His candor left me struggling for a response. Part of me wanted to accept this apparent change of heart at face value, to believe that people, even James, could learn and grow. Another part remained wary, conditioned by years of experience to expect the other shoe to drop, for this new, self-aware James to revert to type. I appreciate the apology, I said finally. Truly, but James, you've hurt us both deeply. Words alone can't fix that. I know, he nodded. I'm not expecting forgiveness or even understanding. I want to do better going forward, for Emma's sake, if nothing else. That's all I've ever wanted, I said honestly, for you to be the father she deserves. Emma returned then, sketchbook in hand, seeming to sense the charged atmosphere she'd walked into. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I assured her. Your dad and I were just talking about the future. James checked his watch. We should probably get going if we want to be back before dark. He turned to me. Would it be all right if I brought Emma back here next month? There's a meteor shower that weekend. She mentioned she'd like to see it from the lake. The request was so normal, so free of the undertones that had characterized our co-parenting communications for years, that it momentarily threw me. Of course, I said. That would be fine. After they left, Catherine returned, eyebrows raised in silent question. James apologized, I told her, still processing the encounter myself. For everything. The custody case, how he's treated Emma, all of it. And you believe him? Catherine asked skeptically. I'm not sure, I admitted. But I think Emma got through to him somehow. She has a way of cutting through pretense that even James can't dismiss. On the drive home that evening, I found myself thinking about change, how people change, how relationships change, how dreams long deferred can suddenly seem within reach. The custody battle, painful as it had been, had forced certain truths into the open. Emma had seen her father clearly for perhaps the first time. James had been confronted with the consequences of his actions, and I had rediscovered parts of myself that had been buried under years of doubt and accommodation. The next morning, I woke early, my mind still churning with thoughts from the weekend. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, opening a blank document. At the top, I typed, Walsh Books, business plan. By the time Emma returned from her weekend with James, I had filled 10 pages with ideas, research, and preliminary budgets. When she walked through the door, I was surrounded by sticky notes and printouts of similar businesses in lakeside communities. Whoa, she said, dropping her bag and surveying the chaos. You're really serious about this bookstore thing. I think I am, I said, surprised by how right the words felt. What would you think about spending summers at the lake? We could live above the shop. Emma considered this, head tilted thoughtfully. Would I have to work in the store? Only if you wanted to, I laughed. Though I'd pay you, obviously. What about during the school year? We'd keep the apartment here through the school year, at least until you graduate. After that, we'll see. The store might only operate seasonally at first anyway. Emma sat across from me, picking up one of my research printouts. It's going to be a lot of work. It is, I agreed. And there's no guarantee it will succeed. But I think it's time I tried. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I think so too, and I want to help. She pulled her sketchbook from her bag. Actually, I started some designs while I was at the lake. For the store logo, maybe. She flipped the book open to a page filled with different variations of Walsh books, each with a distinctive style. One in particular caught my eye. An elegant design incorporating a small boat on water, the letters of Walsh forming gentle waves beneath it. Emma, these are beautiful, I said, genuinely impressed. When did you learn to do this? She shrugged, but I could tell she was pleased by my reaction. I've been taking a graphic design elective this semester. Ms. Patel says I have a good eye for it. She's right, I said, studying the designs more closely. Would you want to work on this with me? The branding? Maybe the store layout? I'd value your input. Really? Her face lit up. You'd let me help design your store? Our store, I corrected impulsively. Well, mostly mine until you're 18. But after that, who knows? Maybe you'll want to be part of it." Emma looked stunned. "You mean like co-owners someday?" "If that's something you'd be interested in," I said carefully. "No pressure. You might have completely different dreams by then." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Dad apologized again on the way home. He said he's going to do better." She looked up at me. "Do you think people can really change?" The question was heavy with implications. About her father, about our family, about the future we were tentatively building from the wreckage of the past. "I think people can change when they're truly motivated to," I said slowly. "When they see clearly what they stand to lose if they don't. Your father loves you, Emma. If anything could motivate him to change, it would be that." She nodded, absorbing this. "He said something else too. He said you were always stronger than he gave you credit for, that he underestimated you." The admission surprised me. "Did he?" "Yeah. And then he said he was sorry for trying to make you feel small, because you never were." Emma looked at me intently. "You know that, right? That you're not small?" I felt something shift inside me. The final piece of a long, incomplete puzzle clicking into place. "I'm starting to remember that. Yes." Emma smiled, satisfied. "Good. Because this bookstore owner I know, she's kind of a badass." I laughed, startled by her language, but touched by the sentiment. "I'm going to need a badass business partner then. Know anyone who fits the bill?" "I might," she grinned, turning back to her sketchbook. "But she drives a hard bargain. Profit sharing, creative control, and you have to stock that weird fantasy series she likes." "Sounds reasonable," I said, my heart full as I watched my daughter bend over her designs, already envisioning our future together. "I think we have a deal." That night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, surrounded by the beginnings of my new dream. The past few months had been some of the most challenging of my life, forcing me to fight not just for my daughter but for my own worth and voice. The custody battle, painful as it had been, had ultimately given us both unexpected gifts. Emma had found her strength and voice, standing up for truth even when it was difficult. And I had rediscovered the woman I'd been before years of subtle erosion, the woman with dreams and determination, who wasn't afraid to take risks. As I sorted through Emma's logo designs, my phone chimed with a text from James. Emma mentioned, "Your bookstore idea. It's a good one. Let me know if you need any help with the business plan or financing options." I stared at the message, trying to reconcile this supportive gesture with the man who, just weeks ago, had called me unstable and unfit in open court. People can change when they're truly motivated to. I had said those words to Emma, believing them to be true. Was I willing to extend that same belief to James? After a moment's reflection, I typed back, "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement that paths forward exist even after the most painful confrontations. That healing is possible, not just for Emma, caught between warring parents, but for all of us. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in the distance was the lake and the small house that would soon become something new. Just as I had become something new through this ordeal, not by changing who I was, but by remembering who I had always been. Rebecca Walsh, bookstore. Owner? I whispered to myself, testing how it felt. The words settled around me like a familiar coat, worn and comfortable. Not a radical reinvention, as Catherine had pointed out, but a return to the self I was meant to be all along. Tomorrow would bring logistics and practical concerns, phone calls to the bank and research into permits. But tonight, I allowed myself simply to dream, of shelves lined with stories, of summer evenings on the deck with book clubs and visiting authors, of Emma helping customers find their next favorite read, of a future built not on fear and doubt, but on courage and truth. The very qualities my daughter had shown me when she stood up in that courtroom and refused to let lies define our story. spring melted into summer, and summer blazed into fall. The transformation of the lake house into Walsh Books proceeded with surprising speed, fueled by my newfound determination and Emma's enthusiastic support. We spent weekends painting walls, building shelves, and curating the initial inventory. What had once been my parents' cozy living room now housed carefully arranged bookshelves, comfortable reading nooks, and a small coffee bar in the corner. The deck had been expanded to accommodate outdoor seating with a view of the lake. The perfect spot for the author events I hope to host. 3 months after that pivotal custody hearing, on a crisp October morning, I stood at the front door with a set of shiny new keys in my hand. The sign above the entrance, featuring Emma's boat and waves design, caught the morning light. Walsh Books, it proclaimed in elegant lettering. Beneath, in smaller script, where stories find you. Are you going to stand there staring at it all day? Or are we going in? Emma asked, appearing beside me with a box of final decorative touches. Plants, framed quotes, and the handmade bookmarks we'd been working on for the grand opening. I grinned at her. Just taking a moment. This still doesn't feel entirely real. Well, it better start feeling real soon, she laughed. We've got 24 hours until people show up expecting to buy actual books. The grand opening had been timed to coincide with the lake's fall festival, when the summer residents returned for one last weekend before winter set in. It wasn't ideal timing for a new business. We'd have a short season before the quiet winter months, but the publicity opportunity was too good to pass up. As we put the finishing touches on the space, I marveled at how much had changed in 6 months. The custody battle that had felt like an ending had somehow become a beginning, the catalyst for a cascade of positive changes in our lives. Emma and I had grown closer through our work on the store. I had rediscovered my passion and confidence. And most surprisingly, my co-parenting relationship with James had shifted into something I would never have thought possible, a genuine partnership. The changes hadn't happened overnight. There had been setbacks, tense conversations, old patterns threatening to reemerge. But James had followed through on his promise to do better, attending the court-ordered co-parenting counseling sessions, without complaint and maintaining a consistent visitation schedule even when work pressures mounted. When I'd mentioned my plans for the bookstore, he had offered not just moral support but practical assistance, connecting me with a former client who specialized in small business loans. He'd even shown up one weekend with a truck full of lumber, and his sleeves rolled up, ready to help build the custom shelving I'd designed. You don't have to do this, I'd told him, confused by this unexpected gesture. I know, he'd said simply. I want to. For Emma. And for you. Watching him work alongside our daughter, patiently teaching her how to measure twice and cut once, I had glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Before ambition and control had hardened him, before our marriage had devolved into a power struggle neither of us could win. Now, as Emma arranged plants along the windowsills, my phone chimed with a text from James. Good luck tomorrow. Emma says the place looks amazing. Sorry I can't be there to see it. He had been called away on an unexpected business trip, missing the grand opening he'd promised to attend. 6 months ago, I would have seen this as another broken promise, more evidence of his unreliability. But the text had come with flight details and an honest apology, not excuses or defensiveness. Small changes, perhaps, but significant ones. I typed back, "Thanks, we'll send pictures. Emma picked out a stack of books she thinks you'll like when you visit next time." Progress, not perfection. It had become our unofficial family motto. The bell above the door jingled, startling me. We weren't opening until tomorrow, but Catherine walked in, arms laden with bags. "Special delivery," she announced, setting everything on the counter. "Refreshments for tomorrow, and moral support for tonight." "You're a lifesaver," I said, peeking into the bags. Catherine had gone above and beyond, as usual. Homemade cookies, fresh fruit, local cheeses, and what looked like several bottles of champagne. Though I'm not sure we need that much champagne. "One is for celebrating tonight," she said firmly. "The rest are for tomorrow. Trust me, everyone will want to toast the newest business owner in town." As Catherine helped us arrange the final displays, my phone rang with a call from Diane, my attorney from the custody case who had since become a friend. "Just checking in before the big day," she said when I answered. "How are the nerves holding?" "Up?" "Surprisingly well," I admitted. "I'm more excited than nervous." "As you should be. I've been telling everyone I know to come check it out. Half the firm is planning to drive up tomorrow." "You didn't have to do that," I protested, though I was touched by her continued support. "Please," Diane scoffed. "After what we went through together, I'd be offended if I didn't get to be part of your victory lap." After we hung up, I turned to find Emma watching me with a thoughtful expression. "What?" I asked, self-consciously smoothing my hair. "Nothing," she shrugged. "I was just thinking about how different you seem now, compared to 6 months ago." "Different how?" She considered this. "More yourself, I guess. Like you've stopped trying to be smaller." Her observation stopped me in my tracks. She was right. For years, throughout my marriage and even after the divorce, I had made myself smaller, quieter, less demanding. I had accepted less than I deserved, afraid that asking for more would somehow confirm what James had implied throughout our relationship, that I was too emotional, too impractical, too much. The custody battle had forced me to stand my ground, to fight not just for Emma, but for my own worth as a mother and a person. And in doing so, I had reclaimed parts of myself that had been dormant for too long. "I have stopped trying to be smaller," I agreed. "And you know what? It feels incredible." That evening, the three of us, Emma, Catherine, and I, sat on the deck overlooking the lake, sharing a bottle of champagne, sparkling cider for Emma, as the sun set behind the mountains. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. "A toast," Catherine declared, raising her glass, "to Walsh Books and to the incredible woman brave enough to make it happen." "And to Emma," I added, "co-creator and future co-owner. I couldn't have done this without you." Emma beamed, her face flushed with pleasure and pride. "To us," she said, "and to new beginnings." We clinked glasses as twilight settled over the lake. Tomorrow would bring stress and excitement, success or failure or something in between. But in that moment, surrounded by the people who had supported me through the darkest times, I felt only gratitude. Later, after Catherine had gone to bed in the upstairs guest room, and Emma had retreated to what had become her room at the lake house, I sat alone on the deck, watching the stars emerge. The grand opening was only the beginning, I knew. Running a bookstore would bring challenges I couldn't yet anticipate, especially in the quiet winter months. There would be financial pressures, inventory decisions, marketing hurdles, all the ordinary stresses of small business ownership. But after what we'd been through, those challenges seemed manageable, even welcome. They were the kinds of problems that came with pursuing a dream, not defending your basic right to be a mother to your child. My phone lit up with another text, from James. "Just landed. Wanted to wish you and Emma sweet dreams before your big day. You've done something remarkable, Rebecca. I hope you know that." I stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There had been a time when James's approval had been everything to me, the metric by which I measured my worth as a wife, a mother, a person. Now his words were welcome but unnecessary. I knew what I had accomplished. I didn't need his validation to feel proud. Progress, I thought again, for all of us. The grand opening exceeded every expectation. By mid-morning, the store was packed with a mixture of locals and visitors in town for the fall festival. Children sprawled on cushions in the young readers' corner, while their parents browsed the shelves, or sat on the deck with coffee and pastries from the local bakery. Several customers asked about book clubs and author events, signing up for the mailing list I'd created. "We're going to need more inventory," Catherine whispered during a brief lull. "At this rate, you'll sell out of everything by the end of the weekend." She wasn't far wrong. By closing time, our shelves looked noticeably depleted, and the day's receipts far exceeded my most optimistic projections. As the last customers reluctantly departed, promising to return tomorrow, Emma collapsed dramatically into one of the reading chairs. "If I have to say, 'Let me know if you need help finding anything' one more time, I think my face might stick in a permanent smile," she groaned. "You were amazing," I told her, meaning it. She had worked tirelessly all day, recommending books with genuine enthusiasm, helping younger children find just the right story, even troubleshooting when our new credit card system briefly went down. "Seriously, I couldn't have done this without you." "I know," she said, but her smile was pleased rather than smug. "So, does this mean the partnership deal is still on the table for when I turn 18? "Absolutely," I confirmed. "Though, at this rate, you'll probably be running the place on your own by then." After we'd cleaned up and closed out the register, Catherine insisted on taking us to dinner at the lakeside restaurant to celebrate. As we waited for our food, Emma's phone chimed with a video call. She answered, then turned the phone so we could all see the screen. "Dad!" she exclaimed. "I thought you were still traveling." "Just got back," James replied, his face pixelated but clearly visible on the small screen. "How was the grand opening?" Emma launched into an excited recounting of the day, describing particularly memorable customers and proudly reporting our sales figures. As she talked, I studied James's face. He was listening intently, asking questions, genuinely engaged in what clearly mattered to his daughter. Not performing, not going through the motions, but truly present. "Your mom sent me some pictures earlier," he said when Emma paused for breath. "The place looks incredible. I particularly like the sign. That design is really something, Em." Emma beamed at the compliment. "I'm already working on designs for bookmarks and tote bags. Mom says we can sell them as merch once we get established." "Smart business move," James nodded approvingly. "Speaking of which, I have some news that might interest you both." He explained that he'd been approached by a regional business magazine about featuring local entrepreneurs. "I might have mentioned Walsh Books to the editor," he admitted. "They're interested in doing a profile if you're open to it. Great publicity, especially for a new business." I blinked in surprise. "You did that?" "It's a solid opportunity," he said simply. "You've built something worth recognizing, Rebecca." "Art?" After we hung up, Catherine gave me a knowing look. That was unexpected. "He's been full of surprises lately," I agreed. "Good ones for a change." The restaurant owner stopped by our table with complimentary desserts, congratulating me on the store's successful opening. "We need more year-round businesses on the lake," she said. "Too many places close up after summer. You thinking of staying open through winter?" It was a question I'd been wrestling with. My original plan had been to operate seasonally, spring, through fall, and return to our apartment in town during the winter months. But the enthusiastic response from local residents had me reconsidering. "I haven't decided yet," I told her honestly. "There's Emma's school to consider." "Mom," Emma interjected, "you know Westlake has that advanced arts program I've been wanting to try. The one with the graphic design focus, and they're still accepting mid-year transfers." I stared at her. "You've been researching schools up here? When were you planning to mention this?" She shrugged, suddenly very interested in her dessert. "I was waiting for the right time. Today seemed like a good moment, since everything's going so well." Catherine laughed at my expression. "She's got you there, Beck." Later that night, after Catherine had gone to bed, Emma and I sat on the deck wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. The lake was a mirror of black glass reflecting the stars and the distant lights of houses along the shore. "Were you serious about transferring schools?" I asked. Emma nodded. "I've been thinking about it since summer. The program really is perfect for what I want to study, and..." She hesitated. "I like who we are up here, both of us." I knew exactly what she meant. Away from the shadows of our old life, the apartment where we'd weathered the worst of the divorce, the school where Emma had struggled during those difficult years, the community where James's family had deep roots and influences. We had both found new versions of ourselves, stronger, more confident versions. "What about your friends?" I asked. "Your activities?" "I'll miss some things," she admitted, "but I can stay in touch with my close friends. And honestly, Mom, after everything that happened with the custody case, some of those relationships changed anyway. People heard things, took sides. It got weird. I hadn't realized the custody battle had affected her social life so directly." "I'm sorry, Em. That's not fair to you." "It's not your fault," she said firmly. "And anyway, I've already made some friends up here. Lily from the bakery, and that guy from the bookstore today, the one who's into fantasy novels." "Noah," I supplied, smiling at her studied casualness. Noah was the teenage son of one of the year-round residents, a thoughtful boy who had spent nearly 2 hours discussing his favorite authors with Emma during a quiet period at the store. "He seemed nice." "He is," she said quickly. "I mean, I barely know him, but he seems cool. And he mentioned they have a literary magazine at Westlake. He's one of the editors." The pieces clicked into place. "So this sudden interest in transferring schools is mostly about the graphic design program," she insisted, though her blush was visible even in the dim light. "The literary magazine is just a bonus." I laughed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It's okay to have multiple motivations, you know. The question is, are you really sure about this? It's a big change." Emma was quiet for a moment, considering. "I am sure. This feels right, Mom, for both of us. The store, the lake, all of it. It feels like where we're supposed to be." I couldn't argue with that. The past few months at the lake had brought a peace I hadn't experienced in years. The store felt right in a way my library job, satisfying as it had been, never quite managed. And Emma was flourishing, more confident, more creative, more herself. "What about your dad?" I asked. "If we moved up here permanently, you'd see him less often." "I already talked to him about it," she admitted. "Last weekend when you were meeting with the accountant, he said if it was what I wanted, he'd support it. He even said he might look at properties up here for weekend trips." I raised my eyebrows. "He did?" Emma nodded. "He's really trying, Mom." "I know," I said softly. "I see that." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the lake. Finally, I said, "Let's do it. Let's stay. We'll keep the store open year-round, and you can transfer for the spring semester." Emma's face lit up. "Really? You mean it?" "Really," I confirmed. "Walsh Books is officially a year-round establishment, and the Walshes are officially like people now." She threw her arms around me in a fierce hug. "Thank you. This is going to be amazing, I promise." "I believe you," I said, hugging her back. "But you get to help with snow removal in winter. That's non-negotiable." As Emma headed inside to bed, practically bouncing with excitement, I remained on the deck a little longer, savoring the quiet and the decision we'd just made. 6 months ago, I had been fighting just to maintain custody of my daughter, terrified of losing the one thing that mattered most. Now I was a business owner making plans for expansion, watching that same daughter grow into a confident young woman, and feeling more secure in my own identity than I had in decades. The custody hearing, that had felt like the lowest point of my life, had ultimately become the catalyst for everything good that followed. Not because of the outcome itself, though that had certainly been a relief, but because of what the experience had revealed about James, about Emma, and most importantly, about myself. I had discovered a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. Emma had found her voice and the courage to use it for truth, and James, confronted with the consequences of his actions, had begun the difficult work of becoming a better father and co-parent. None of us were the same people we had been on that tense morning in the courthouse. Life had broken us open, forced us to examine the patterns and relationships we'd accepted for too long. And from that painful reckoning had come the chance to rebuild, not the family we had been, but something new and potentially healthier for everyone involved. As I finally headed inside, locking the door of my bookstore behind me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for second chances, for new beginnings, for the daughter brave enough to stand up for truth when it mattered most, and for the woman I had rediscovered in myself, the one who had always been there, waiting patiently to emerge from the shadows of doubt and fear. The custody hearing had been an ending and a beginning, a closing door and an opening one. Walking away from that courtroom, I could never have imagined where the path would lead. To a lakeside bookstore with my name on the sign, to a daughter, entering her own new chapter with confidence and clarity, to a co-parenting relationship slowly healing through honesty and effort. But that was the thing about endings. Sometimes they were merely preludes to the stories that were waiting to begin, if only we were brave enough to turn the page. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.